The Elder Scrolls Online is an MMORPG made by ZeniMax Online Studios that released back in 2014. And although the game had a rough launch like many MMOs do nowadays, several massive updates for the game drastically improved it overall and brought it back from an extremely low point to now being one of the most popular MMOs on the market. I personally have been a player of ESO for 5 years now and have made a ton of content on the game, although last year I did move away from making exclusively ESO content to a more general MMO focus. But for this video, for this Is It Worth Playing, I'm going to break this down into 4 sections. We're going to do an about, pros, cons, and gray area points. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll know if ESO is a game that you should give a shot in the upcoming year. So really quickly to talk a little bit about the game, this is an MMORPG that is set in the Elder Scrolls universe. The game also does have action combat. It is not a tab targeting MMO. The levels in this game go from 1 to 50 for each character, and then you enter the end game progression system, which is called champion points. And thankfully though, these champion points are account wide, with the max level being 3,600. Thankfully though, you only need about 12 to 1,500 of those points to be fully maxed out power-wise, and anything else doesn't really do anything. You also have fully voice-acted quests in the game, giving you that true Elder Scrolls feel. In addition, for the end game in terms of PvE, you have horizontal progression for dungeons and raids, which are known in this game as trials, with multiple difficulty levels. The game also does have extensive character building, which I will discuss more in my pro section, and it's one of my favorite parts of the game. It also does have an open world PvP zone that has massive army fights, castle sieges and stuff, which is really, really fun, as well as instanced PvP battlegrounds in a smaller world type of PvPvE zone known as the Imperial City. The game also does have an amazing player housing system and is honestly one of my personal favorite housing systems across any MMO. There also are a ton of places to explore in the game with lots of available overland content. The game also does have a guild trading system, which makes for an interesting in-game economy, and honestly is kind of like a game in and of itself. There's no central auction house. There's basically guild traders that represent a guild that basically make a guild store public facing. So you would post your items to your guild trader, and then that NPC out in the world is where people can go and buy goods. Now, ESO also does release 4 content updates per year. 3 DLCs, which are like smaller additions to the game, which can include like a dungeon or a new story zone, and then 1 chapter, which typically has the bigger releases and is synonymous with an expansion. Usually will include a raid, class or skill line, or a new system, as well as a zone. The game is also buy to play and does not require a subscription, although the subscription does come with a ton of perks. Similarly to other buy to play games though, with a sub, like not having one does handicap you quite a bit, because having a sub makes inventory management in the game infinitely easier. Also, what's great though, I will say about the sub, is that it does give you access to the new DLCs as they come out, and it thankfully is not pay to win. Also, do note though that keep in mind with the ESO Plus subscription, you will still need to buy the chapter from year to year. The biggest draw to the ESO Plus sub is the craft bag, which puts all your crafting items in an infinitely large bag. It just makes inventory management a lot easier. But thankfully, if you cannot afford to sub, I do have a guide on my YouTube channel on how to manage your inventory without ESO Plus, so feel free to check that out. ESO also does have a companion system. It's not nearly as expansive as a game like SWTORs, but it's still decent enough if you're looking for companions. The game also does have level scaling, which allows players of any level to party up together. The game also does have 3 alliances: the Aldmeri Dominion, the Daggerfall Covenant, and the Ebonheart Pact, and thankfully you're able to play with anyone regardless of alliance except in the open world Cyrodiil PvP zone. The game also does have 10 races and 6 classes, with a ton of available character customization options, not only in the character creation itself, but in-game as well, with a ton of different armor transmogs, dyes, character skins, tattoos, and other adornments, because in ESO, fashion truly is endgame. Now guys, with the about section out of the way, I want to move into my pros and cons and gray area points, and we're going to kick off our pros section with the questing experience. The game has fully voice acted quests, and it makes you feel like you're truly part of the in-game world. When I was a new player, I personally really enjoyed the questing experience in ESO compared to other MMOs I've played. It also is very sandboxy in nature, because you can kind of pick and choose which zones you want to do and when. You don't have to do one zone before another. There also is a zone guide in the game that could also help you follow storylines, show things for you to do in the zone. etc. The game also does have a ton of dynamic world events that you could also participate in as well, from things such as dolmens, dragon attacks, and more. You can also play how you like. While there are 6 classes in the game, you can customize how you play your class a ton. Every class has access to all armor, weapon types, and non-class skill lines. So you can combine your class skill lines, your non-class lines, and your armor lines to make a character build completely your own. If you do decide to play ESO and would like to help help getting started with your character building if it seems a little overwhelming, I have tons of builds on my website, dotsgaming.com, whether it be for PvP, PvE, questing, thieving, solo content. You can truly build your character in a unique way that you find fun and enjoy the game how you want. And again, I have tons of content on my website to help you get started in that process. ESO also does, in my opinion, have fun combat. The combat of ESO is one of those things that keeps me personally playing. It's not a tab targeting game, but rather action combat. You have to block, dodge, use basic weapon attacks as well as your abilities all together to find the most success in combat. And the combat, especially when you get to endgame, is really, really fast-paced and very enjoyable. Now, I do know some people very much dislike ESO's combat and find the weaving mechanic of having to use a left click in between all of your skills to be a bit clunky. But I personally enjoy the combat a lot, and if you are someone that struggled to get into ESO's combat in the past, I do thankfully have a guide on animation canceling on my YouTube channel that can help you get started and learn, how to basically weave and do these other things so you can get the maximum enjoyment out of the combat. Another pro that I have is the horizontal PvE progression. You do not have to do X raid to get gear before you do wide raid. You can pick and choose which endgame raids you like to do. Maybe you want a gear set from a certain trial. These are raids in ESO that consist of 12 people. And maybe you don't like a certain trial, so you don't want to do it. Maybe you want a skin for beating another trial, so you do that one. In ESO, you can thankfully pick and choose the endgame content you want to do, and you're not forced to do anything. Again, this also might be a little bit of a gray area point for some people, as some people do like vertical progression, but me personally, I am a massive fan of horizontal progression. The game also does have no continuous gear treadmill. While the max level in the game is 50, that's just the start. Once you hit 50, you get into the endgame progression of champion points, which, like I said, are account-wide. So let's say you get to CP 50 and you make an alt. The alt has access to those 50 CP, and once you level that character to 50, they instantly become CP 50, which is the CP level of your account. Now, before I get into the continuous gear treadmill, I want to explain CP points because they play a role kind of in that. The champion point system did get a massive overhaul during 2021, and if you decided to return to the game, and if you haven't seen this CP system before, I have a video on my channel that covers it. But a quick and dirty version of it for this video is that you can level your champion points all the way up to 3,600, with about 12 to 1,500 of those points being usable at this time. Now, while that level sounds absurdly high, because let's be honest, it is, they adjusted the experience curve of earning champion points, so there isn't a ton more experience than what was needed in the old system. Plus, ESO does run double XP events a ton, so it's easier to grind out those points in the system. Anyway, you invest those earned champion points into stars, which give your character passive boosts. Certain passives require to be slotted in something called the champion point bar to be active, while others are active at all times, but it will be indicated on the tooltip whether or not you need to slot it. But if, again, for more, refer to my CP guide if you want a more detailed explanation on the system. Now, the reason that I explain how CP works is because it plays into endgame gearing. Gear stops leveling at champion point 160. So once you hit CP 160, you will be able to wear max level gear across all of your champion point leveled characters. And the best part is that all of your characters share a bank. All gear is account bound, so you can pass gear between all these different characters, which prevents you from having to regrind gear over and over and over again for each character. And once you get your gear, your account has that gear, especially with the new sticker book system. You can bind pieces of gear to your account, and so if you end up, deleting it, you don't want it anymore, you can actually recreate the piece of gear for one of your characters and use it. And thankfully, too, you also can have storage in your house in addition to the bank with the storage chests. And so, I have a ton of gear on my character, so every patch I can go through, see what gear is good, and create a new build for a new character. And again, just being able to maintain your characters in ESO with the way the gearing is very, very easy. Once you acquire stuff, you have it forever. You don't have to regrind it. And so once you have your account set up, it pretty much is good to go for a very, very long time, which I really do enjoy. I love not having that treadmill. PvP in ESO is also incredibly fun when it works. And I want to make this disclaimer since it plays into my biggest con about the game. So PvP in ESO is incredibly fun. There's infinite character customizability when it comes to making a build, and so you can really put something together that is truly your own and suits your playstyle. ESO PvP does, however, have a steep learning curve, but once you get it down, you'll be able to really appreciate the fun, fast-paced combat that comes with ESO. The game also has a ton of outplay potential, so one person can, if they are good enough, take on groups of enemies by themselves or maybe with just a friend or two, allowing for a display of skillful gameplay, which to me is incredibly awesome. ESO PvP does also feature massive castle sieges in the PvP zone of Cyrodiil, where the three factions fight for dominance over the zone. And if you capture all the castles surrounding the Imperial City, the person with the most PvP points, which are called Alliance points, for that PvP cycle, is crowned the Emperor, and they get a ton of rewards and power increases while they remain Emperor. There also can be Daedric weapons that spawn that give the wielder incredible power, helping your faction fight back its enemies. So if you like this kind of large-scale PvP, you're going to love Cyrodiil. For those who love smaller engagements and instance PvP, the game also does have battlegrounds with various game modes where 3 teams fight to win the objective of the match. There also is a PvPvE zone called Imperial City, which is personally one of my favorite PvP zones in the game and does offer a lot of fun content as well. Another pro that I have is that you can play with anyone. You can quest and play with any friends, regardless of faction or level, due to scaling within the game. This makes playing with friends and family who come to the game easier and puts less restrictions on playing with friends. ESO also does have a ton of content with no shortage of content when you first get started. Questing, PvP, housing, trials, dungeons, solo raids, trading, farming, crafting. ESO has hours and hours of content to keep you busy no matter what you enjoy. One of the greatest things that came with ESO in 2021 is going to be quality of life. They've improved a lot of QOL things in 2021. You now have the Armory, which allows you to make build profiles, the sticker book system, which again allows you to store gear on your account, and if you do get rid of it, you can recreate it. You have curated loot, which is like bad luck protection when farming dungeons, and more. ESO did a great job in 2021 adding a lot of good quality of life features to the game, and it has improved in that department quite a bit. But now with my pros out of the way, I do want to move into my gray area points, and I have one primary gray area point, and that is going to be the guild trading system in ESO. I think the trading system is not as bad on PC compared to console, but the trading system in ESO is not for everybody. A lot of people do prefer a more central auction house type of style, and with the guild traders, there are just a lot of different trading NPCs scattered around the world, and so sometimes finding what you want can be extremely difficult. Now, it's not as bad on PC because we have a website called Tamriel Trade Center, which curates all of the different like traders into one location, so you can go to the website, search your item, and then boom, you can find out where it is. But you don't have access to that on console, so I don't really necessarily think the trading system in the game is honestly the best. It's really similar to Crowfall's system in a lot of ways, which I think has massive problems, and I do think that the only reason trading doesn't feel abysmal on PC is because we have the TTC website. Now, personally, what I think ESO could do to improve the trading system, I think there are a lot of people that do love this, though. A lot of guilds heavily involved with it, so I don't think they would ever change it for that reason. But in a hypothetical world, if they ever did, I think something like Albion's trading system would be really good for ESO, where you have like a town auction house. Maybe it's not like an auction house for the entire game, but more like a town, so each major city has its own auction house, and you can basically post items there. So I think that could be pretty cool. It's a way to kind of keep a similar feel to the system, but make it way still easier to navigate compared to what there currently is. But again, the guild trading system is something that some people love, some people hate. I think it's going to be a lot more preferential, just kind of to what you like yourself. Now, moving into our next section, guys, we have the cons. And for me, most of my cons about ESO don't really have to do with the game itself, but rather things surrounding the game. And the first thing I want to talk about is the big elephant in the room when it is, when in regards to ESO, and that is going to be the performance. The ESO has a bad reputation for having really bad performance, and unfortunately, it is true. During primetime hours at open world PvP zone of Cyrodiil that I mentioned runs really, really, really bad. Even during the day, you can have problems depending on the day. Like sometimes it'll be fine, sometimes sometimes it won't be. And just between having low frame rates due to memory leaks, your ping's going to spike around. Sometimes, again, it'll be okay, but other times it's just really bad and can just be the luck of the draw from day to day. Even in trials, you'll get these random frame rate issues in certain spots, and then in other spots it'll be totally fine. In addition, and the biggest thing that has been putting a massive damper on ESO's performance, there's been a new performance problem that was introduced back in 2020, which added a ton of ability delay and lag to your skills. And sometimes you'll be trying to use your basic attack, that light attack, with your skills, and sometimes it just feels like your character locks up and instead does nothing. And this can be very tilting if you're in a tough PvP fight or in an intense moment in a trial and you can't deal the damage you need to deal. You can't finish off your opponents simply because the game won't let you. Sometimes you'll have to press an ability 5 times before it eventually goes off. And again, this is most noticeable in that open world PvP zone of Cyrodiil, but sometimes it can leak into other parts of the game as well. It has before, and again, it's really weird, but it depends on the day-to-day. Now, with all this being said, ZeniMax does keep saying that they're trying to improve performance. They're expecting ways to fix the performance of the game, etc. But with that being said, I kind of have the opinion now of I'll believe it when I see it, because the first year of performance improvements they did in 2020 generally made my game run worse in some ways and slightly better than others. Most of the improvements came in non-combat situations, but most of the in-combat performance issues are still very much present, and these issues are then only exacerbated on consoles as well. For those who don't know, ESO is on PC, Xbox, and PlayStation. There is no crossplay though. But like I said, the performance problems I mentioned here are worse on console just because it doesn't have as good of hardware as PC does. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that ZeniMax did also say that during 2022, they're going to be undertaking the task of rewriting a lot of the game's base code to help improve endgame performance. So we'll see if that ends up netting us any actual improvements in the long run, but at least for this year, guys, at least for 2022, the game's terrible endgame performance will still be a thing that you have to deal with. The next thing that I want to talk about is bugs. ESO encapsulates the programming meme, and I say this every year in my Is It Worth Playing video. 99 little bugs in the code, 99 little bugs in the code. You take one down, patch it around, 127 little bugs in the code. This isn't felt as much by new players as it is by endgame players who are engaging in trials and PvP and endgame dungeons, but there are some bugs in the game that just have become a way of life. Getting stuck in combat bug, sprint bug, streak bug, undo bug, blast bones bug, gap closer bug, CC break bug, health desyncs, positional desyncs, getting stuck in weird areas, activity finder bugs, getting attacked mid dodge roll, and more. This is something that ZeniMax tries to fix from patch to patch, and while some patches are not as bad as others in the bug department, 2021 was a very bad year in terms of bugs, with old bugs coming back as well as new ones being introduced, and I'm not really sure if that is going to be changing going into 2022, because at least based off of, what I've seen so far, it doesn't feel like it, but, we will have to wait to see depending on what happens throughout the course of the year. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is balance. Now, I'm not talking about, X class being too strong or too weak, or Y item being overpowered. I'm not talking about that, because when it comes to balance about video games, obviously opinions are going to vary based on who you talk to. When I talk about balance in this game being a con, I'm referring to the wild nerf and buff swings that happen in this game from patch to patch. Skills can be buffed or nerfed by insane amounts going from one patch to another, which can very much lead to gameplay fatigue when it comes to the endgame player base. You'll finally get a build assembled, tested, and be enjoying it, and then you'll have to worry, is a new patch going to roll around and nuke your build and make it completely unviable after you just put it together. This has led to a feeling of change fatigue or change whiplash in a lot of players, and something I desperately want to see fixed in 2022, because it is truly exhausting. The next thing I want to talk about is endgame content droughts. Now, while ESO does have a ton, a metric boatload of questing and overland content to do, as an endgame player, you can blast through it, and it doesn't pose any semblance of a challenge, which I'm going to get to in my next con. But per year, you can expect 4 dungeons, 1 raid, and then the quarter 4 release will kind of vary. Sometimes it's another 12-person trial. And other times it's an arena, which is like a solo or 4-person raid. And occasionally it's only the new story zone and nothing for endgame players. PvP-wise, we have Cyrodiil, which is that open world PvP zone, that large-scale zone. Instance BGs, or Imperial City, which is that PvPvE zone. And like, that's been it for a while, and ZeniMax has already pretty much said they're introducing no new content for 2022. So for a PvPer, you're going to mostly be getting your experience and enjoyment from, just the enjoyment of combat itself, but that can be strained if bugs and performance are really acting up. So as you can tell, endgame content, when you've been playing the game for a while, can feel like it's got a bit of a drought over the course of a year. Now, we also have very easy overland content is my next con, and I think that it's one of the biggest reasons that as an endgame player, you can kind of feel like there's a content drought in the game, because for those who don't know, overland content in ESO is basically the world's content, such as questing through the stories, exploring delves, public dungeons, etc. And basically, it's anything that's not instance. And ESO's overland content is painfully easy, and it's a complaint that I've seen from a lot of newer players, and it's one that I echo myself. A good way I think to describe ESO's questing experience is that it's essentially like a graphic novel where you just control a character. If you only care about experiencing a story and don't care about the difficulty of the quests themselves, you're going to love ESO's questing. The voice acted quests and the decision making that impacts the world can very easily draw you in, but if you're looking for something that has literally any level of difficulty, you're not going to enjoy it. Personally, I always found it really jarring to spend hours going through a quest line to face the big bad final boss of that and then just punch him directly in the face with zero effort. And again, I think that's part of the reason that as a longtime player, it can kind of feel like there's a bit of a drought, because like all this new questing content comes out and like you don't really feel too motivated to do it because there's like no challenge to it. You just face roll through the whole thing, And again, like if you're a newer player to the game, if you're deciding I want to get into the game, fresh, there's so much content at your disposal, and you will not run out anytime soon. But for a long-time player, definitely something to be, I think, a little concerned about. Now, the last con I want to talk about, it's a new one that I've added for this year, is that the difference between normal and vet content is hilariously high, and there needs to be a better difficulty curve with maybe a third difficulty or some sort of adjustment. So there's two primary difficulties in the game. You have veteran and normal, with normal obviously being easier. But the problem is that in certain instances, the difference between the normal content and the vet content is insane. You'll have I think Maelstrom Arena is one of the perfect instances to highlight this. It is a solo, basically like a solo raid, which is really good to be able to get the weapons at the end. The final boss drops really good weapons that are very good for PvE. Now, the issue is that normal Maelstrom Arena is a joke. It is super easy. You can face roll through it and destroy it. And I've talked to so many new players who beat normal Maelstrom and they're like, man, I did really good. Like I got it. I think I'm ready to try vet. And they literally can't get past round 1 in vet. Like the difficulty curve is so steep between the two levels. And they've done a better job, I think, in more recent content releases with recent dungeons about making that difficulty curve a bit better. But I think in some of the older content, it's still a bit steep. But I just think that the game would really benefit from like a third difficulty level or just some sort of way to smooth the curve between normal and vet content to make people feel like when they get into that vet content, they're not just suddenly slapped across the face and wondering like, what, but I did fine in normal, like why can I not do vet? So Just something that I've noticed over the course of my time playing the game, and something that I think would be a very good improvement. Now, do I think ESO is worth playing? I think if you're someone who's really into hardcore raiding, I think it's going to really depend. The raids in the game are really fun, and the mechanics are interesting, and the combat is very enjoyable. And I personally do love doing trials in ESO, but you may have to worry about longevity since ESO releases 1, maybe 2 trials per year, although they do release 4 dungeons. And again, performance, bugs, and balance should be a concern to keep in mind for anybody interested in endgame playing, since endgame content in ESO is what's most heavily affected by the game's performance problems. And there was actually a period of time, I think in 2020, where trials were completely unplayable for like 1 or 2 months due to game-breaking bugs. However, ESO's vet hard mode raids do pose quite a challenge, and that raid difficulty combined with attempting to do the raid quickly with no deaths for achievements will give any hardcore raider a nice challenge. But again, a question of longevity should definitely be something to keep in mind. But again, when you're new to the game, there's plenty of content that can be at your fingertips. Now, if you're a PvPer for, interested in ESO, again, gonna depend here. If you're looking for ranked PvP, not the game for you. But if you're looking for massive, large-scale fights, trying to fight outnumbered, doing 1 or 2 VX, maybe 3 VX, giving yourself a personal challenge, or just doing some sort of casual PvP, this is a great game for you. Again, performance, bugs, and balance concerns should be something to keep in mind, though. Also, if you're super into character building, obviously you can't recommend ESO enough. It's like the biggest thing that keeps me coming back and playing, and why I love PvP so much in the game, because you can just create so many different builds and play styles. And in PvP, again, when it works, is a ton of fun. But again, keep in mind, bugs and performance problems should be considered. If you're a solo player or quester, I obviously think this game is super worth playing. The game has an insane amount of questing content to get lost in. Just keep in mind, the quests are not difficult. So if you're looking for a challenge, you're not going to find it here. Now, if you're into player housing, I have to say yes. Houses in ESO are not only cosmetic, but they're functional. I've seen people make some crazy, insane stuff with their in-game housing, and it's incredibly easy to get lost in. And I would arguably say that of any MMO, ESO has the best player housing, and it's definitely something I recommend taking a look into. And I just feel that overall, ESO is a great game for the casual player. If you're looking for an MMO that you can jump into, have some fun on, and maybe take a break and not feel like your account is falling behind or behind when you come back, the game is amazing. If you're into housing or story quests, you're going to love ESO. And if you're a player looking for a more hardcore endgame raiding, PvP, or dungeon experience, the game is good in a lot of ways. The content itself is fun when it works, but I do want to leave you with a piece of advice from a longtime player. ESO is what you make of it. You need to go through your ESO journey understanding that the game does have performance issues with its end game. But if you don't take it too seriously and enjoy the game for what it is, you're going to have a good time. However, if you start to get really serious with the game, in my opinion, you're going to get very frustrated with the performance issues, and they're certainly going to wear you down. But with that being said, I do definitely think ESO is an MMO worth trying, despite its faults. Even with the endgame content, it is still fun, despite the performance issues. Again, you just need to, I think, either adjust your mindset or how much you actually interface with that content. And I do personally think that ESO is one of the best casual MMOs on the market. The game has come a long way over its 8 years of development, and if you haven't tried it in a really long time, I do think it's 100% worth coming back to and giving another look. And what's really good is that you can get the game cheaply from my Green Man Gaming link in the description below, since there's more than enough content in the base game to get your feet wet and try things out to see if the game is for you. But guys, that is going to be it for me today with my ESO Is It Worth Playing in 2022 video. If you do play ESO, what do you think about the game? Or if you have tried it, what are your thoughts on it? Leave a comment below. If you guys did like this, I'd appreciate it if you smacked a like on it. It really does help me in that YouTube algorithm. And guys, for more ESO content as well as MMO Is It Worth Playing and first impression videos, please hit that sub button as well as the bell to keep those notifications on. So thank you all so much for stopping by today. I do very much appreciate it. As always, I'm Dots Gaming, and I'll see you on the next one.